Now, Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Thanks for being with us this Easter weekend, and I'm very pleased to be joined by the new Executive Director of Rhode Island Housing. It's a major player in Rhode Island's housing market, and we're going to hear all about it today, and that's Barbara Fields. She's been acting Executive Director since mid-January, but the job is officially yours as of about a week ago, right?
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And
Glad
thanks
to be
for coming
here.
in. So, I want to start by giving people sort of some Rhode Island Housing 101, because I think there's plenty of people who've heard of Rhode Island Housing, but they might not be exactly sure where you folks fit into the mix and what you do. So let me start by asking, how would you describe Rhode Island Housing's purpose?
Rhode Island Housing's purpose is to be part of the economic engine that drives the state. We provide housing for those people between $0 and $100,000 a year in income, and our goal is really to help people move into the middle class, stay in the middle class, and for those people who can't get into the conventional market.
Do you build houses at Rhode Island Housing? Do you have a bunch of construction guys? What do you do?
We finance housing. So we finance the development of new homes, both rental apartments and home ownership opportunities. We finance that. We also finance the preservation of existing. Yesterday we announced the preservation of 200 senior homes in Providence. So we do that as well. And we also provide vouchers for people so that they can rent homes and pay a portion of their income towards that.
That's Section 8
yes.
housing? Yep. So last year I looked at your budget. Rhode Island Housing spent about $90 million on its expensive. Where does the money come from, and what's your biggest expenses?
So basically we put about $370 million into the economy because we do provide mortgages. So we help people to get that mortgage, but we also buy mortgages from lenders in the local community. So basically helping to provide liquidity to the local bankers who are placing the mortgages for people. In addition, we handle about $170 million a year from HUD, providing the
HUD being the federal U.S.
Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Where you used to work?
Yes, spent 3.5 years there, and we provide vouchers for people. We also provide use some of the HUD funds to provide financing for the building and preservation of housing, and we leverage private investment. So we provide a whole variety of investments into the community.
So is Rhode Island Housing sort of, it might sound like a government-created bank? Is that one way to think about it?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, great. It's always nice to hear that I got my things correct, right? But you don't hear that a lot on this show. So one question you might get from people is, why does Rhode Island Housing need to exist? We have banks already. As you said, they do mortgages on their own. What's the role that you need a quasi-public agency to play in the market what happens because of Rhode Island Housing that you wouldn't otherwise?
Well, housing finance agencies were created primarily in the 60s and 70s as to be a bridge between public housing and the conventional market. And our role is to help Rhode Islanders get into a home and have a better place to live, work, and recreate.
So, but couldn't they go to a regular bank and ask for a mortgage there?
We provide a slight advantage to people by helping them get a slightly lower mortgage rate if they're income eligible, and also help produce additional apartments and homes in the state.
And part of how you do that, you have, I looked, nearly $1.5 billion in outstanding bond debt is on Rhode Island Housing's balance sheet. How does borrowing fit in with this? Rhode Island Housing doing the borrowing versus, as you said, banks doing borrowing and then you guys backing it up?
Well, we are given the legal authorization to borrow those funds in order to create the resources to help people get into a home ownership or a rental opportunity who might not otherwise qualify in the conventional market. But we also work with those banks who place people through a conventional product, and we provide additional liquidity in the market. So additional money for banks to do even more. We're here to partner with the banks to get more done in the state to create jobs, which is why I'm here, along with the governor's agenda. This is all about creating jobs and improving the economy here.
Is there a risk to taxpayers? You know, people remember what happened with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and knowing that that much debt is on your balance sheet, or what has been the history with that?
We get no funding from the state, and we actually have solid ratings. We get rated by Wall Street, and some of our ratings have gone up recently.
So you're feeling good about the health of the place. I'm curious too, what share, if you know this, what share of the mortgage market goes through Rhode Island Housing? Is it a large chunk of mortgages end up going through Rhode Island Housing? Is it?
I don't have that number handy, but we do serve a large portion of the market, and we serve an increasingly larger portion of buying the mortgages that the private market places. So we're a large player in the marketplace, even though we are now actually originating a decreasing portion of that. We're working more in partnership with the lenders.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's been a shift for Rhode Island Housing.
Absolutely.
From being the mortgage provider to the private bank does the original mortgage, then you buy the mortgage off of the private bank.
In the last 2 years, we've dropped the percentage that we originate from about 80% down to about 40%, and we expect to go even lower as more of our business is done with the private lender. So that, again, contributes to getting more people in homes, creating more jobs, and aligning with the governor's agenda.
That's interesting. What's driving that shift?
Policy changes, streamlining our process, making some modifications on how we look at loans.
Okay. We have had in recent, as you know 2 reports came out from the Department of Housing and Urban Development examining how Rhode Island Housing managed federal funds and raised questions about some potential misspending or mismanagement of that money. This was obviously before you got there, and you've been brought in partly to fix these things. What went wrong there, and how concerned are you about it?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for your viewers to understand that we managed $170 million from HUD last year. And they did reviews. I was at HUD. These are standard government reviews. And they've raised a couple of administrative concerns, and we are fully prepared to fine-tune our policies and procedures to address those concerns.
Are you worried about that relationship with HUD at all? Is there a broader problem there? Are they nervous?
Absolutely not. As I said, it's a $170 million relationship in 2014, and I expect it to be about the same in 2015. We are working with them to move through those administrative concerns, again, fine-tuning our policies and procedures and moving forward. It's a partnership. And having been there, I know from the HUD side how important it is to have the partnership with Rhode Island Housing. And now at Rhode Island Housing, understanding the partnership is important to us too. All
right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk much more about Rhode Island Housing and Barbara Field's vision for it as she takes over from longtime executive director Richard Godfrey, as well as the role for Rhode Island Housing, as she's mentioned, because she's on message today on the governor's budget. So we're going to hear all about that. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and I'm joined today by, I think, in her first in-depth interview, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Barbara Fields, the new Executive Director of Rhode Island Housing, a big agency, a major player in Rhode Island's housing market. And we're talking about her vision for the agency as well as what she's seeing in housing trends more broadly. And Barbara, I want to go right to that question, actually. So you beat out another finalist for the job. Again, congratulations on taking over. What was your pitch to the Board of Commissioners at Rhode Island Housing about why you were the right person for this job and what you want to do with the agency as its new leader?
Well, I have a career committed to the mission of Rhode Island Housing, which is making Rhode Island a better place to live and to work. And I felt like I could come in and align with the governor's agenda of jobs. As she is successful in expanding the jobs in the state, people need a place to live. And we are in that role, and we can play a very positive part in helping Rhode Islanders get a place to live, whether it's a rental or a home ownership opportunity, but we'll also be creating jobs along the way. I spent 20 years in the neighborhoods of Rhode Island. I worked at the regional level, and I'm so excited to come back to the state. And I think the other thing is our partnership with the private sector and helping them do more business here in Rhode Island also creates jobs and opportunities for Rhode Islanders.
And I know sometimes when a new executive takes over somewhere, the big question is: Are you going to change everything? Are you leaving mostly in place and it's steady as she goes? How do you view it? Do you think most things are working well around housing? Is there a lot of new things you want to do?
Yeah, I'm so excited to take over from this team. Just yesterday, your former newspaper that you worked at, Providence Business News, named our CFO as the top CFO in the quasi-public arena for 2014. I come in to take over a solid financial situation and a strong team. There's always changes and tweaking around the edges, but I feel like we are doing great work in the rental area, in the home ownership area, in the mortgage servicing area, and doing great things to add to the economy.
The agency, as you alluded to, had some challenges, got beat up a little in the press in the final phase of last year, partly led to Richard Godfrey's exit. How's morale in the organization when you came in? What did you find?
I think people were excited about the opportunities that new leadership presents. We are here all committed to the mission. I am so impressed with the quality of the staff and their commitment to helping us continue and expand on this mission.
So a new study out today this week from Pew says about 2/5 of Rhode Island households have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which is a metric used a lot for affordability. It makes it one of the priciest housing markets in the country. Maybe no surprise to anybody to hear that. Why is housing so expensive in Rhode Island?
Well, I think you see this in a lot of the metro areas around the country. We have tremendous demand at all price points in the home ownership side, and we don't have enough supply on the rental side. But our job is to help Rhode Islanders get into the middle class, stay in the middle class through a variety of programs and products that we have. So my goal will be to expand those opportunities, to work with the governor, because as we build and manage housing, we are creating jobs and more opportunities. But we really do need more supply.
And more supply, does that too mean primarily more construction? Do we need to have, higher buildings, denser areas? I mean, what needs to be done? And
yes,
of course,
I would say yes
to everything.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of outreach because in this being a major driver of the economic growth here, we've been meeting with the not-for-profit developers, the for-profit developers, the brokers, the lenders. We need all hands on deck as we continue to provide opportunities.
How much is it out of your hands and even Governor Raimondo's hands? Because so much of what can get built and what does get built is decided at the local level, local zoning boards, local zoning codes. I mean, can Rhode Island Housing sort of nudge them into building more, or is it more going to have to be a decision made locally?
I think it's a partnership, and I hope to do a lot more outreach to towns and municipalities across the state, because we have opportunities to add across the state. So I will just give you an example. There's a new development, North Cove in North Kingstown, 34 units of affordable rental housing in a community where people have access to bike paths, good schools, better commerce. And when those got built, we were having construction jobs and now the management jobs. And at the end of the day, families have a place to live. And when they're paying the right rent, that means they have more opportunities to spend on the things they need for their families, school supplies, car insurance, the things that everybody needs in order to sort of have a strong family. I
want to shift gears slightly. I know this morning you attended an event at the Rhode Island Association of Realtors as part of the outreach you're talking about. What's the sense you get about the health of Rhode Island's housing market right now? We're getting a bit into 2015, looking out at the year. I mean, has it recovered all the way, would you say, from the session? Where are we?
Well, we're very excited because we've actually returned to pre-recession levels. Last year, we more than tripled the mortgage volume at Rhode Island Housing, and we had 350 people in the room who are out there selling, and they're seeing a robust market. Our numbers for January and February 15 are up over January and February of 14. Again, I think as the governor is successful and we align with her, we're going to need more supply to meet that demand. As jobs grow, people need places to live.
Rhode Island also was, of course, hit hard by the foreclosure crisis when the housing bubble burst in the mid to late 2000s. At this point, how big a problem is foreclosures and loan modifications, all of that now, after we are a number of years out from that? Is it still a major issue?
Foreclosure is still a problem, but I am pleased to see the numbers here are slightly below the national averages. And we are really continuing to work on that. We have a lot of opportunities for people to come in and to help them in that situation. And we helped over 1,200 families last year figure out the best way to move forward in their situation. So we'll keep an eye on those numbers, as you say. I'm glad to see that our numbers are holding steady and starting to decrease a little.
You talked about Governor Raimondo a lot here, and I know she proposed in her new budget, which is being vetted now, giving Rhode Island Housing $3 million for an affordable housing fund. If that's approved by lawmakers, what's the plan? How would you use that money?
Okay, we have very specific plan for that. So there is something from the federal government called a low-income housing tax credit, and there are two types. And this money would leverage the 4% credit, create jobs, and build apartments and preserve those that we already have. So it would be leveraging private dollars, which would be a win for the state, obviously creating more commerce here, getting housing built, getting jobs built. And I think it's part of the governor's overall agenda that housing is part of growing the economy.
Is it hard to attract capital into building apartments in Rhode Island? Because we hear sometimes from developers and they talk about the mismatch between the cost of building in Rhode Island and the rents you can get, et cetera, which is part of why you don't see a lot of new market price unsubsidized housing here.
No, and I think Rhode Island's housing's role as an economic driver is to provide part of that capital to encourage further investment. Just the other day we announced a deal which brought Citibank into the market for the first time in that type of residential development. It was a preservation and upgrade of 200 senior apartments in Providence next to the Da Vinci Center. So not only are we increasing the affordable housing stock by helping them stay in those homes that would otherwise be deteriorating and maybe losing them, they're staying affordable, and they're next to a community center where people have a better quality of life. And we're excited that a new bank is coming into the market.
All right, we're going to take another break. We come back, we're going to talk more with Barbara Fields about where Rhode Island Housing goes next, how it's fitting into Governor Raimondo's plans, and what her experiences was in that job regionally with HUD. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and I'm talking with the head of Rhode Island Housing, the big quasi-public agency does a ton in the Rhode Island housing market, Barbara Fields. And Barbara, Rhode Island Housing, of course, isn't the only government player on housing policy at the state level. We have the Division of Planning that worked on the Roadmap RI plan. We have Commerce RI now getting a significant role under Governor Raimondo. I mean, is there a risk here that housing policy gets bifurcated, or is it being centrally looked at somewhere?
Actually, I think it's being centrally looked at. We are working with the Department of Commerce and Stephen Pryor, the secretary. So I am part of his team, working with Department of Labor and Training, Department of Business Regulation, Division of Planning and Community Development, all hands on deck, trying to figure out the best ways to align government so we can boost the economy and create jobs.
There was quite an outcry about that Roadmap RI plan toward the end of last year, though it did end up getting approved. Do people have a reason to be fearful that this creates some significant new ability for the government to, I don't know, do more forced building or whatever people thought it was, or do you see it as a sort of a continuity document?
I think that housing is part of growing a vibrant economy, and again, our role in that is to help people who can't get into the conventional market provide more housing opportunities. So as I talked to you about North Kingstown and North Cove Landing, we're doing projects in Burrillville, we're doing projects in Providence, we're doing projects in Newport. Every community in this state wants to have places for residents to live, working people who can have an opportunity to rent or own a home. We actually serve people between $0 and $100,000 a year in income, and that's positive for the state.
Right now, I think there's a law in the books that it's supposed to be 10% of the housing stock in each municipality is affordable, and many municipalities haven't made it there. I mean, is that just an unreachable goal for a lot of places, do you think, or are there things that could be done to get them closer to that?
Well, I think it is something that each community can attain, but it's our responsibility to work with them to see what are the different opportunities for them to do that. As I said just before, working up in Burrillville, they're very excited to welcome this new development that would be just half a mile from Daniele Foods and the factory where Stephen Pryor and the governor went. And they're going to be adding jobs. And it's great to know that just down the road there'll be a place for people to rent a home. There'll be a community center there, a health center there. So there's lots of opportunities. And as I said, I was at the Realtors Breakfast. They're seeing strong demand to buy homes. So we're trying to help provide more opportunities.
You have, as I mentioned, regional experience because you were the New England administrator for HUD. So you had all the states around here. I'm curious, how different are Rhode Island's challenges in the area of housing versus what you saw in Massachusetts or New Hampshire and Connecticut? Or is it are these mostly New England-wide problems with affordability, with construction, et cetera?
There are some issues that are pretty much New England-wide. We all have high energy costs throughout the region, and we all have the oldest housing stock in the country is in New England. So we have some of those issues around renovation and rehabilitation. And then if there were any split, it would be between northern New England, which is more rural, and southern New England, which is rural and urban as well.
Yeah.
But I think that there are a lot of best practices that I've picked up, and I'm anxious to put them to work here in Rhode Island, especially on that 10%. There were ways to work with communities to get more housing built in the neighborhoods.
You were at the announcement of the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank proposal with Treasurer Magaziner and Governor Raimondo were there. It's another proposal, part of the budget, about helping buildings get more green, et cetera, some unique financing mechanisms there. Do you see a role for Rhode Island Housing in that? I assume if you were there, were you just cheering them on, or do you think it could help you guys?
No, the treasurer sits on our board at Rhode Island Housing, and I'm working very closely with the governor, her team. Anything that we can do to add to that, obviously there are other focuses there, but there will could be a residential component. We're already working with the Clean Water Agency on looking at sewer issues often when people are building homes and financing homes. So it's a natural for us. I think it makes sense. It will create jobs. It will green Rhode Island a little more. And as I said, we have some of the oldest housing stock, so we want to see those energy costs come down when we are able to bring into the state some of the newest technologies.
You know, you have, circling back a bit, I was talking about the Rhode Island Housing's portfolio, about $1.5 billion outstanding bonds and, of course, loans against that to pay them off. Is there any cap on your portfolio? Have you considered, should it be $3 billion? You know, should you be going out to do a lot more to get a lot more projects done? Or what sort of determines how big you're willing to let Rhode Island Housing get?
Well, we can grow. There is no cap, but we work with our board to make sure that we are financially sound. And we will look at that as we go into the future, and I work with the board members. We are anxious to add to the governor's agenda, and I think if we saw an opportunity, we would take advantage of that opportunity to help more Rhode Islanders get in the middle class.
Has the lower interest rate environment made it easier for Rhode Island Housing to do deals? Is there more opportunity right now?
It's just been a shift. Obviously, we are doing some more of our business out of our portfolio because in the bond market, the interest rate is higher than what we can do. So we want to really be able to provide the best product to people. And I think it's also, giving people an impetus to maybe get into the home ownership market because those interest rates are currently historically low.
So what's your message to folks out there who might not have had any interactions with Rhode Island Housing, depending on where they are? You know, who should be coming to see you? Who should be talking to you?
Well, I think that developers, both not-for-profit developers and private developers, should come to see us about the opportunities. We have a number of various products on the home ownership side, some that I've talked about, but one that I haven't talked about is we have a first-time homebuyers tax credit. It's a federal credit that people can get up to $2,000 a year if they qualify for the life of their loan. So we have some of those products that we're working with the brokers and the lenders on. So if you're thinking about buying a home and you don't know a broker, we'd be glad to help you out either at Rhode Island Housing or direct you to a broker. And as well as looking at rental opportunities, we're always willing to answer questions and direct people to the places where they can get help in their own community.
All right, a sales pitch for her new employer, Rhode Island Housing, from Barbara Fields. Thank you, Barbara, for joining me. And thank you for tuning into Executive Suite. If you missed any of this episode or any other episode of the show, you can always catch all of those on WPRI.com. Don't forget, you can also catch Executive Suite and Newsmakers now Sunday nights at 6 p.m. on AM 630 WPRO. See you next week on Executive Suite.